First of all, thank you for having WAVAW here tonight. We would like to acknowledge the unceded Coast Salish territory that we are gathered on and that we get the privilege of living and working on daily. In addition, we'd like to also acknowledge that we are gathered at the Gold Court Center for the Arts, and that has significant meaning, especially when we are addressing this topic. We cannot forget that environmental justice and gender justice are inextricably linked. Colonization in all of its forms has devastating effects on women and on the communities that they live in. Now, this is a huge topic, and figuring out what the most important points to leave you with tonight was a real challenge. Tonight, we will not be speaking to police response. We know that many of our allies and activists in the community have been working diligently to require accountability from policing services around our province. Tonight, we will focus on Crown Counsel and the judiciary, mainly because of the power that they both hold in decision-making about women's experiences with sexual violence before the court and the current lack of accountability to the public. A quick trigger warning that some of the images that we're using may draw some strong feelings, and I think that they should. We are, after all, speaking about horrendous acts of violence. I feel so often that we have become so desensitized from the realities of sexual assault. We see it every day on CSI or Law and Order. We hear about it in our communities, but most of us really never have to look at it head on. We felt like it was important for us as a rape crisis center to actually name and remind ourselves what it is that we are actually talking about before we get into how the law is implicated in all of our experiences. The reality is that 1 out of every 3 women sitting in this room has already or will experience sexual assault during her lifetime. Sexual assault is not something that just happens and you get on with life and you forget. It interrupts, it changes our worldview, safety has to be redefined, we carry the shame of the violence that was enacted upon us. The implications can be so significant that women can no longer stay on the planet and end their lives. I'd like to take a moment here and ask every one of you to think about their last sexual experience, with yourself or with somebody else. Got it? Okay. Now turn to the person to your left and tell them in detail about what that experience was like. Okay, don't actually, but think about how that felt. Now imagine if that was an experience that you didn't consent to and somebody felt entitled to take from you. That's what's expected of women over and over when they are contemplating engaging with the criminal justice system. Imagine the devastation when you're told by a system that purports to deliver justice that your experience just doesn't make the cut, and there is no formal recourse or action you can take. This is the reality when Crown is given complete discretion with no required transparency or explanation about their decisions. So why do we see this over and over? As Canadian society, we do purport to believe that it's wrong to hurt women. That as women, we are entitled to equal rights, safety, and dignity. That our state is expected to take all appropriate measures, including legislation, to ensure the full development and advancement of women by offering us these things. And there are laws that back this up, laws that feminists and their allies have been fighting hard for decades. But the true question is, do we actually ground our practice in response to sexual violence against women in law, or is it more accurate to say that we ground it in culture? We would argue that we aren't doing a very good job of actually grounding our responses in law. We can't even begin to discuss the issues that women face when trying to have their sexual assaults heard before the courts if we don't back up for a minute and realize the context and culture that we currently live and breathe in. We know that we are all influenced by our social context. So when we have human beings running the systems that are meant to provide us with justice, it is imperative that we contextualize the realities in which these individuals are living and breathing as well. In the first image, we have a group of Zeta Psi fraternity pledges posing in front of the Yale Women's Center with a sign that says, "We love Yale sluts." These are America's next best lawyers, judges, and politicians. This was the year after George Bush's old fraternity on the same campus posted a video online of pledges chanting, "No means yes, and yes means anal," outside of women's freshman dorm rooms at night. The second image is from Maxim magazine. This is a 4-step how-to guide to cure a feminist, to make her a good woman, who's far less clothed and ready for action. and not the activist type of action. The third image is what we're using to sell skateboards to our youth, a clear indication of a woman's worth. From Ivy League educational campuses to an innocent perusal of a magazine, we're told over and over by this rape culture about women's status in our society. This is an obvious contradiction to the laws and social values that we just saw. This cultural climate is not only socializing men to feel entitled to women's bodies and have expectations of women as purely objects, but it also grooms women to tolerate and expect these types of experiences. We're often told that justice is blind, that those who enter into the professions in the criminal justice system are to take a neutral stance and be objective. Where do we think the judiciary and Crown Counsel are located? How is it possible for them to be blind and sit outside of culture? We just saw the picture of Yale's best and brightest. The danger is to pretend that justice is truly blind. There's this falsehood that those involved with the criminal justice system wear an impermeable shell that saves them from being influenced by what we are all socialized and groomed to believe in, as we are raised and live in this rape culture and society. We must acknowledge the fact that there are particular values that get played out in the courts. It is not objective or passive. Fighting to end violence against women is not one of those values that are upheld in court. It is much more commonplace that Crown Counsel and the court accepts myths and stereotypes about sexual assault and women, which informs charge approval, trials, and sentencing. We read headlines like this in our media almost daily, especially right now with the missing women's inquiry being so front and center. We are constantly receiving messages about what our state thinks about women, race, colonization, class, and justice after sexual assault. And the message is, we don't matter. It is unacceptable for those held with the responsibility of representing society's values, those whom are supposed to denounce unlawful conduct and to keep our communities safe, to continue to act with complacency and apathy towards this social epidemic that is sexualized violence against women. The everyday acceptance of decisions to not hold rapists accountable suggests that rape is not a deviant and unusual behavior, but behavior that mirrors the expectation of male domination within society and that the state carelessly sanctions. Like we said at the beginning of this presentation, we have good enough laws, for now. We call on those in Crown Counsel and the judiciary to fight for women. We call on them to uphold the laws of the land, to apply them the way they were meant to be applied, acknowledging the reality of sexism in our society. To investigate their own biases and how the current rape culture impacts them. To unpack their learnings and socialization about the value of women. To think about how they ask questions, how they deal with women as witnesses, and to recognize the significant impact these processes and meanings derived from these processes have on women's lives. This summer, WAVAW will work with the University of Alberta Law School to further this work and support the changes we want to see for women. We all have a hand in stopping rape. Thank you.